So this last week or so has been really interesting for the Boston Celtics fans, media, and players a lot, and really just NBA media in general from what we've been hearing. So the Boston Celtics this time last week, they were up 3-1 in the NBA playoffs, about to close out against the Philadelphia 76ers. Joel Embiid comes back in Game 4. Boston still wins that game by nearly 30, lose Game 5, drop Game 6. Jason Tatum can't play in Game 7, and then lo and behold, the Boston Celtics blow a 3-1 lead to the Joel Embiid-led Philadelphia 76ers. A couple days later, Jaylen Brown gets on a Twitch stream, which he's done the entire season, and he's analyzing film. Couple of things that stuck out was JB saying that the refs have an agenda against him. A lot of the fouls that he felt that should have been called for him were not called in his favor. Obviously, he kind of ignored things he did in that game, like the push off on Maxey that actually injured Joel Embiid's knee, leading to a hyperextension. Things of that nature that were simply omitted from his context. But the thing that stuck out to everybody was Jaylen Brown saying that this season was his favorite season as a Boston Celtic. I think a lot of people maybe misconstrued that comment, but today we're going to get into that comment, what has spurred since then, and whether or not it's time for the Jays to go their separate ways and break up. What's going on, guys? Welcome back to BoxInOne here, a basketball podcast created by Roischand and Joachim, myself talking right now. Long story short, Celtics blow a 3-1 lead, turmoil follows. Staying on the Jaylen Brown comment, circling back to that, he said that this past season for the Boston Celtics, the 25-26 season, was his favorite season as a Boston Celtic. I feel like a lot of people overreacted to that comment, right? Because when you hear a guy who's talking about he loved the trench work, he loved the fact that this was a season where he had to prove people wrong. At one point, he was top 5 in MVP voting. But on top of him, we saw guys like Baylor Shireman, Jordan Walsh, Ron Harper Jr., Luka Garza all step into their roles. Even Peyton Pritchard had a leap in terms of his own guard skill set. All of these guys who would not have gotten that same opportunity if Jason Tatum was healthy. I understand what he says here. I think sometimes people need to remind themselves why they do it and why they love the games they play. Ever since Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum have been a duo, they have been the favorite in the Eastern Conference every single year. When we look at their runs, even when they failed with Kyrie, even when they lost to Jimmy Butler, even when they lost to the Nets, the Celtics story has always been, if they're healthy and these two guys can stick it out, oh my goodness, they're going to win a championship. 2022 was looking like that year, especially after the crazy All-Star game turnaround. Stephen Curry was inevitable. Ime Udoka, I don't know why you were doing drop coverage against Stephen Curry to this day, but still, 2022 would have been the perfect season. They didn't get it done. 2023, they almost completed the 3-0 comeback, but Jason Tatum's ankle got cooked. They lost in the Eastern Conference Finals. 2024, you get Porzingis, you get Drew Holiday, and you wash the entire league. Now, that 2024 ring, in all honesty, I can understand how it's a little bit unsatisfying. Pacers without Tyrese Halliburton. Cavs were pretty much injured. You swept the Miami Heat, who didn't have Jimmy Butler. I can get it from a player perspective, especially a guy like Jaylen Brown, who seems to be really cerebral for the most part, how mentally that's not going to fuel you and feed you into the next season outside of going for a repeat, because that run was ordained. Everybody knew the Boston Celtics were the best team in the league. They had the most favorable odds, and then you play the Dallas Mavericks in the finals, who by all means are not a bad team, but objectively speaking, when we look at that Mavs roster compared to Boston, they could not compete. The only team I think of the West, or the two teams in the West that could have possibly given Boston a little bit of trouble, were the 2024 Thunder and also that Minnesota Timberwolves team that had Gobert, Cat, McDaniels, Ant. That team could have done some damage because of the bigs matchup, and I believe those teams were like 2-2 in the season between the Wolves and the Celtics for that 23-24 season, but I digress. Jaylen Brown's comment, there's absolutely nothing wrong with it. I think the issue is now we're seeing a lot of media guys have their own opinions. I mean, Evan Turner saying, yeah, I don't know how these guys stayed together so long. It's great they won a chip. They probably got a breakup. JB feels disrespected. Tracy McGrady saying things in the media. Yeah, somebody who is a mentor to Jaylen Brown, he feels disrespected by this Boston Celtics franchise. I think the first thing looking at Jaylen Brown, you have to say whether or not you feel this way. There's nothing wrong with you saying that, okay, the refs don't call the game fairly for you. I'm not saying that there's anything not wrong with it, but in the context of how he feels as a Boston Celtic, I don't think there's anything wrong with it. I think he also clarified the statements later saying, look, I was just talking about me as a player in the uphill battle and the challenge. Again, going back to you need to be reminded as an athlete why you do these things sometimes. I think the issue presents itself, though, in terms of how he took the loss, right? When you have a film analysis and a film breakdown session with fans, very intimate moment, because it is fans getting a player-first perspective of the game, and you're not really taking accountability for a lot of the mistakes he made. I know he was talking about the pass he could have made to Keita. He saw Embiid trailing. Personally, Boston's always a live by the three, die by the three team. They died in Game 7, but I don't even think that pass to Peyton Pritchard was absolutely wrong, especially because Joel Embiid was on a defensive tear. He was getting whatever he wanted in the post and also on Keita. But I think this overall conversation regarding should the Jays break up, I think it's an overreaction. When we look at this Boston Boston Celtics team, you got guys like Baylor Shireman, Ron Harper Jr., Jordan Walsh, Luka Garza. You have guys that can develop and will be deep for you in the future when you give them the minutes. Derek White was mostly the issue with this Boston Celtics team. When you had Anthony Simons to defer the offensive load off of Derek White, and Derek White could kind of just be this 3-and-D guy, getting 70 blocks and 90 steals in the season, one of the few guards, one of the few players in the league to do that. When you could have him play that role, it was absolutely fine. When you swapped Simons for Vucevic, and granted, Vucevic was averaging around 25 and 12 when he got traded to Boston, so I understand that decision, but when you swapped Simons for Vucevic, Derek White had to have the ball in his hands a lot more, and Derek White is a guy who can't shot create. He's a guy that can't dribble that well. He's a guy that can't facilitate that well. He's a hustle player. He's a guy that when he hits shots, it's great. He's a floor raiser most of the time, but when he's not hitting his shots and he's forced to play on ball more, it's going to be a dark, dark day. That's what got exposed. Derek White having one of the worst career playoff runs we've seen from him thus far. I think when we look at this Boston Celtics roster, the Jays can still work, but you need an actual point guard. I'm not dissing Peyton Pritchard, but you need a guard who can facilitate and shot create. I'm not saying go get a guy like Ja Morant on the Boston Celtics, but I have no issue if the Boston Celtics got Ja Morant, kept Pritchard, and got a center, because you need a guy in Peyton Pritchard who can still be that spark off the bench, can be a point guard if your star guy is out, can get his own shot, can play off ball and facilitate. And I think Peyton Pritchard being a leader to those guys like Shireman, Garza, Ron Harper Jr., I think that's really good. Even Hugo Gonzalez, Boston's draft pick that did great this year. I think Boston has everything they need in order to make a deep run in the East again. I know people are saying swap JB for Giannis. When I look at Giannis Antetokounmpo and Jason Tatum, one of them is going to have to take a step back. It's more than likely not going to be Jason Tatum. Jason Tatum is going to be the point forward playmaking. Maybe they're going to have some pick and roll action. I'm not saying if you could swap Giannis for JB, I wouldn't be opposed to that. But when we look at how this team meshes together, all this team is really missing is a good backup big and a point guard. You get Rob Will back, you get Ja Morant. All of a sudden, this Boston Celtics team is Morant, it's Brown, it's Tatum, someone at the 4, it's Rob Will. You have Vucevic play the 4, you have Rob Will, you got Cade off the bench with Garza, you've got Gonzalez, Harper, Pritchard, Shireman. All of a sudden, the Boston Celtics look like they're a team again. You let go of Derek White, probably let go of some draft capital. I know Rob Will is a free agent. You probably are able to afford that if you let go of Derek White as well. You don't need to overreact. You don't need to hit the panic button every time your core doesn't work out. This is not a Denver Nuggets situation where you got Christian Brown making 125 M's a year, and Peyton Watson was injured, and Aaron Gordon's injury prone, and Jamal Murray maybe is not the best guy with Nikola Jokic, and you don't have a lot of shot creators. This is a Boston Celtics team that still has all the tools needed. You just need a PG, and you just need a center. You don't need to throw the bag for Giannis, because if Giannis doesn't work out in your first year, you're going to have to pay him a lot of money if he decides to stay. And then on top of that, you're going to have to pay Tatum a lot of money eventually as well. Pritchard, you're going to have to give money. What are you willing to let go for your future banking on a duo of Tatum and Giannis? That's a very scary and elite duo. But in my opinion, this team doesn't need that. They need somebody who can control the offense, who can push the pace when needed, who can be another facilitator and playmaker outside of Jason Tatum, because the issue with Jason Tatum coming back is that he was their best playmaker off an Achilles tear. That's the issue. When you're leading a team in assists as a point forward coming off of an Achilles tear, that's a problem. It needs to be addressed. The issues with this Boston Celtics team are in the post, not having the depth and another backup big, not having a guard. And Giannis Antetokounmpo, in all honesty, while he does help the post defense, he doesn't help this team stagnation in terms of live by the 3 and die by the 3. A guy like Ja Morant, he's a guy who gets into the paint as a guard. He's not a 3-led guard. Giannis Antetokounmpo definitely turns Boston again into a 3-level scoring team. But when Boston was playing their depth, they already had that. Whatever reason, Joe Mazzulla reverted back to live by the 3, die by the 3. If I'm Boston, I'm not saying Joe Mazzulla is on the clock, but I'm definitely looking at that and seeing how he coached. I think it's a gross overreaction to the situation. I don't think the Boston Celtics should listen. There's small trades that you can do to still remain a contender. But in the last 20 years of the NBA, you have one of the most prolific scoring duos in NBA history that gel together, and they love playing with each other. And in my opinion, it would be a shame to let it go after a season that was supposed to be a year off, and you were supposed to be in lottery contention, and you still finished number 2 in the East, and you still overaccomplished to the point that people are looking at this season as a disappointment because they thought you could win the finals because of how good Jaylen Brown was. Keep them together, make those marginal changes, Boston will be back. With that being said, though, guys, that is going to do it for us today. Again, as always, if you enjoyed the content, make sure to like, comment, share, and subscribe. Follow all of these socials in the description: the TikTok, the Instagram, the Twitter, the Spotify, X, wherever you get your hoops content. We're there, and we will see you all in the next one.